Welcome back to the Real Triathlon Podcast. We have a very different type of show today because we don't have Jackson, Lisa, or Garrick on here, but we have my dear friend and colleague, Scott Tindal, co-founder of Fuelin. And you've probably seen his face everywhere because, Scott, you're everywhere right now.
Thanks, Nick. I'm just laughing because no, I'm not. But
yeah, every time I open my feed, man, I'm like, oh, man, there's Scott again. His face is talking about something.
Do you know, actually, I will tell you something funny, and this is pretty funny and awesome news, but I got sent a couple of pictures from, it must be over in Switzerland or Germany on some news broadcast, and it was a photo of me and Imogen Simmons at Taupo. And it says Imogen Simmons cleared, and I'm in the photo. It's a photo of me with her, and I'm like, why am I in that photo? But awesome news that Imogen's been cleared, and I know I sent her a message last week. We've been in contact during the period, and yeah, just awesome relief for her, I'm sure. So
yeah, big news. And today's episode, I think we're going to cover my specific injury is kind of what brought about us getting further in contact. You messaged me after you saw my crash, which was about August 22nd, and you were keen to throw your hat in the ring and say, hey dude, let's make sure you're coming back on the right path. And what did you kind of think about that initially?
Yeah, I think, look, I saw you crash, and I was like, oh shit. And you instantly said, I fractured my hip, and I was like, oh no, that's not good, but let's get this sorted. So I think like 3 days later we had a call, and always when I see an injury, and I see athletes do this time and time again, they're like, oh, I'm injured. Oh, well, nutrition's not important. And I'm always like, no, that is like the most important time to dial it in. And it's an opportunity, to fuel or feed the injury to ensure that you optimize your recovery, but also an opportunity to perhaps reset you, baseline everything, and to say, okay, well, it is what it is. Let's get on top of everything maybe I haven't got on top of whilst I've been injury free. So that was the goal, and thankfully everything's been going pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, based off of external perception of everyone I run into, they're like, I can't believe how fast you've healed. And I would put a lot of that weight into what I've been able to overcome. Not like it's, I didn't have a tragic accident. It was self-induced. And of course, I don't want empathy or sympathy. I just want to know, like, you guys can learn from my mistakes. First and foremost, going into this brain fog period, overtraining, I wouldn't say I was in any necessarily issue of being injured by running. I was running and swimming well, but nothing was coming and clicking on the bike, and I kept forcing it, and I wasn't resting. And then that morning I had a lot of brain fog, and I just crashed unlike any other situation. So Scott, what do you see athletes routinely push through, especially when it comes to how they feel versus like the numbers, and what are we doing wrong? Like, why do we have this mentality?
Oh, look, I think it's just the competitive mentality, isn't it? You want to be better, you want to push, and you think more work equals more results. And I think that's a big part of the coaching part, isn't it? Like, you as a coach, and you fell into it in that way. It was like, I got to keep pushing. It's just recognizing the signs, I think. And you touched on the subjective element of it. And I think athletes really need to think about the subjectiveness of how they're feeling, not just looking at HRV, resting heart rate, sleep hours, and strain scores, and readiness scores and things like that, which ultimately, look, those scores are arbitrary, made up numbers. Can be useful again over time if it's you and that's your baseline. Then yes, certainly look at them, but use them. I think again, like a lot of athletes have all this technology as well, and they're not actually, they'll see the number and it says 30, and they're usually 70, and they're like, it doesn't matter. And maybe on a one-off day, it doesn't matter. But if that number's constantly pushing lower and lower, then you got to sort of take note. And back to the subjective questions, I think it's something we used to have in Fuelin, and just for whatever reasons we removed them when we rebuilt the app, but we're bringing them back. And I think it's something so important. Just how are you feeling? What's your mood? What's your energy? What's your soreness? How was your sleep quality? And respecting those responses and talking to your coach. And if you don't have a coach, actually just reducing either the intensity or the duration of the session on that day, and seeing how you bounce back.
We love to use the numbers to validate an excuse for why things didn't go well, but we're not using those as a proactive measure to prevent ourselves from getting too far in that well to begin with. And I've fallen victim to that my whole career. So
I think everyone does. Like, honestly, like I think I did a little survey on Instagram. It was like an Instagram story, obviously not anything to write home about, and certainly not research worthy. But it was like, does anyone actually pay attention to the numbers? And I think it was overwhelming. It was like over 80% of people were like, yeah, nah.
Yeah.
Like, that's just what happens. And so I'm very pro data, but use the data. And I think that's a really good segue into what we did with you, is like, okay, well, where are you currently at? What can we currently do to try and improve the outcome of the fracture? And then what can we use as subsequent sort of reassessments along the way? And I think it's just a good, you can take that sort of line of thinking into anything.
Absolutely. And just for a bit of backstory, I would say I am not uncommon in terms of how I handle the injury, with my initial reaction of doom and gloom and just kind of fearing for the worst. But that was quickly resolved. Obviously, having a big team to kind of help support me, having everyone reach out. But I would say relate this to any level of injury that you can, because the mindset, the program, the pause that you have to hit during an injury can really be the most beneficial thing. Walking away personally, everyone has been worried about my mindset. Like, how have you been handling not doing anything? And honestly, Scott, I say this without any doubt. I have been so content with doing this from recovery and doing less and having a build. Like, it's finally a reset. It's like COVID all over again, when you get to just like have the pressure off, get healthy, and work on the mindset. And so, Scott, with what we did while I was injured for the first opening times, you did kind of have to hit me into the reality check a few times. And I appreciate that. Coaches are not doing a good enough job telling people to do less. And that is something I think we should talk about too. Do you see that? Do you see a lot of holding back, or do you see that I don't want to lose a client, I want to make sure they're happy, versus, telling me no?
Well, it's always a balance, isn't it? You don't look. I think it's always treat the athlete, not the injury. In that respect, like, you can still do a lot even during the injured period. Although in the very acute period, it's like, no, Nick, you need to stop. You need to rest. And yeah. I think you say, do you just appease the client? No, you don't. The person works with you for your professional opinion. And if your professional opinion is you need to slow down and you need to rest, then that's exactly what I would be saying, and that's what I would hope anyone who has any sort of, backbone would say to any client, regardless of who they are, whether they're a professional athlete, a CEO, or whatnot. And I think that's why people work with certain people, because they're happy to be told what to do, and that's probably what they're paying the money for, or are seeking their services for. So, yeah, I've got no problem saying what I think. That's pretty clear generally. Is it always right? No. But it's probably based on clinical experience. It's based on what I understand in the research, and putting that all together, and hopefully putting together a decent plan. So I think with you, it was, there's always doom and gloom, and I'm definitely guilty of that as well. If I get injured, it's like, oh God, like, the world's coming down, and then it takes, a couple of hours or a day to sort of just take a step back and go, okay, it's not that bad. I know I can recover. And with you, it was that. It was like, no, mate, it's fine. Let's give you some things to do in the meantime to focus on, which isn't necessarily physical, but let's get your ducks lined up. And I think that was a good move for you. And you hearing, actually, recovery is going to be pretty straightforward. We had sort of some timelines thrown in combination with your orthopedic surgeon. And I think just you understanding some timelines, some functional performance markers, some other baseline measures, it sort of helped align your thoughts.
Yeah, into the details, we'll kind of break down some of the processes that I think were most beneficial that you recommended. One of my favorite quotes that I say to all my athletes is, crisis precipitates change. So unless you hit these big landmarks, until you're challenged, until you have to restructure, you're never going to be a different person on the other side. You might just look a little different, but at your core, you won't change. And at the core of this, I am different. I am rejuvenated for the next couple of years of my career in a way that I haven't felt since maybe 2015. So I think I needed this. You gotta realize that, right?
Yeah, definitely. Look, and one of the things I remember saying to you early on was like, I personally was probably a little bit concerned about how lean you were getting in the
Yeah.
build up to this. And I think you touched on it there. You had a little bit of brain fog and maybe the results weren't going your way. And I think one of the first things I said to you when you got injured was like, and I'm sure in the back of your mind, you were like, oh no, I'm probably going to get a bit fat. And it's like, that's all right. Like actually the focus here, mate, would be getting healthy. And I think putting on a little bit of body fat, trying to gain a little bit of lean muscle as well, and ultimately gaining a little bit of weight is going to be beneficial for you. And that was the first thing I remember in that, 3 days after the accident, you're sitting on the couch. I remember talking about that, and I remember like you were like, oh, but you understood. And I think deep down you knew this is going to be beneficial for me, and it allows me to take off a little bit of that pressure with regards to all of that. And we said, let's feed the injury. Let's make sure you're in a calorie surplus. Let's make sure you give that bone every opportunity to heal. And unless you are feeding it, you're feeding it good quality protein, good quality carbs, and even just carbs. I'm not even going to say quality carbs. Like, yes, there is a focus. We said lots of fruits, lots of vegetables, but it was total carbs. And we just needed to make sure that your total calorie intake was in an estimated surplus. And you didn't have a training program built into Fuelin, but that was okay. I said, just look at it, hit your protein, hit your carbs in line with the meals of the day, and let's just do that for the next couple of weeks. And you were like, okay.
Absolutely. There wasn't a lot that really struck me more than that phrase, feed the injury. And I knew that. And luckily my wife was, for a couple of weeks, she fed that injury. I wasn't able to prepare food. So I had a lot of support and I was eating a lot. And I did think at one point, I was like, I've had a pretty good physique my entire life. And especially in the last 5-6 years, it's been not necessarily a staple that I hinged on, but it was something that was a byproduct of my lifestyle. And I didn't want to lose it. And so part of me was thinking, is this that time when I will start to lose a little bit? And I never did. Well, go figure. Like now I'm back to feeling great about myself. Not that I really lost much because I was still swimming after like a couple weeks, but breaking down the step-by-step process of the things we did, Scott, was make sure we lean into x-ray and imaging. I did not have surgery, so the risk of it displacing a very recently broken joint or a bone was quite high. So we would talk about the x-ray. We would talk about getting a DEXA scan to make sure my bone density was still high enough, a resting metabolic rate to make sure that my calorie intake was still adequate. And you even referenced a lot of things that made a lot to me. I mean, you worked with Jan Ferdino a little bit on some of his comebacks and injuries, and obviously he's a colleague of yours. So you brought in some of that knowledge to me, and that really made me feel quite safe.
Yeah, it was, like you mentioned, I think one of the first things, again, back to body comp, and that was like, is your bone mineral, did your fracture occur because you had low bone mineral density, or was it just purely an unlucky accident? And, thankfully your bone mineral density is excellent, Nick. And that's great news. It's probably because you do lift weights, because you do impact, and despite, being very lean, you have fantastic bone mineral density. So that was a tick. That was a big tick, and probably a bit of relief for me as much as anything to say, okay, well, you're not osteopenic, you're not osteoporotic. We can move on from that. I think the other things that we said is with discussion with your orthopedic surgeon, let's get a baseline on the x-ray. And we know that early x-rays, even follow-up x-rays at 6 weeks, they're probably not going to show much callus formation. And it can be a little bit misleading, but I think the big thing was that there was no misalignment. There was no, the joint and the actual fracture looked like it was healing in line. And that's all you can do at that stage with the imaging. Didn't go down. You didn't have an MRI, did you?
I didn't have an MRI, but I had a CT scan. I had an MRI
That's right.
on my shoulder because I was worried about that impact, which also came back good. But the imaging was super helpful.
Yeah, so that was good, and your surgeon was very much in line with the way we were thinking. You had a period of non-weight bearing, and I think one of the things that got you really excited early on, and again, like in conjunction with the nutrition, was the discussion around blood flow restriction, and using blood flow restriction to hopefully, retard sort of the atrophy, the muscle atrophy, which you can do just by passive. I think we started you off with 10 minutes of passive blood flow restriction, just sitting in your chair and doing that daily, and that's been shown to, reduce some of the muscular atrophy that you will get through your quadriceps and through your calf. And did you use air bands? Was it air bands the product that you used?
Smart cuffs, I believe it was.
Smart cuffs.
But they were super helpful because I was like pumping up to occlusion level that felt good, and we took it down to like 60%, and I'd spend 10 minutes with my legs just throbbing a little bit, and I was like, this is good. This is good throbbing.
Yeah, and you obviously needed to get clearance from your surgeon to make sure that there was no risk of thrombosis or anything like that. But, look, I think we use them a lot at the Maple Leafs. I think they're great. I sent you some information around sort of the levels, the expected levels and the levels of occlusion in terms of percentages of your sort of systolic blood pressure. And, it's just a tool in the toolbox that anyone can get access to. I mean, you can smart cuffs, air bands, whichever ones you want to use. Certainly in that period of time, even a passive and then gradually moving into an active sort of blood flow restriction can be fantastic. And I think you started to use them on the bike once you were allowed to get onto the bike. And it's a really effective way of even challenging the cardiovascular system because of that occlusion, the work it does. So that was something important, I think. And it gives you the injured, it gives you something to do. You got to get onto, the internet. You got to get by them. You got to set them up. You got to read it, at least distract you for a short period of time. The other concerns I think I had at the time was let's just get some bloods done. Let's look at your vitamin D status. I think that was important. It was good from what I recall, lower end of good, and so we got you supplementing. I think you were taking 5,000 IU of vitamin D a day with around 100 micrograms of vitamin K2 in the MK7 form, and that was good. It's just insurance, making sure that the vitamin D levels are on point. And I think we also said, I know you use Rhythm, the blood service, and it was just more a check. Okay, let's just set a baseline. What are your health markers? And I think I also requested that you go and get like a clinical lab draw, and let's look at just things like your lipid values. Make sure that things like your cholesterol, your A1C, all those things are just they're lined up, and you're just thinking about them whilst you're injured.
Yeah, I think the hardest part when you're injured is that first couple of days resetting, trying to reprogram. And as endurance athletes, I think, let's just say it, like you will get injured at some point. It just depends on how small or how big it is. And if you ride a bike long enough, the odds of you having something small to catastrophic increase over time. So this was my moment. And I think I wasn't necessarily worried because I had structure to recovery. I had a clear path. I had checkpoints. And anyone going through any level of stress reaction due to carbon shoes, all kinds of stuff, like you're just running yourself into the ground and then you just can't run anymore because you've sprained or injured something. That's part of our learning process. You can come back with a good mindset, there's resources out there. We were taking supplements to make sure everything that we were eating up, aminos and calcium, on all the minerals that your bones need. We were doing everything right, and look what it did. We're not even into 10 weeks yet. 10 weeks this Friday, and I won't tell my surgeon this, but I've been jumping rope. I've been doing like 6 rounds of 100 with no pain ever. I haven't done anything that's caused pain, Scott. Don't worry. I've been swimming since week 2, flip turning after a few days of that, and maybe just walking with water, or like walking with water at shoulder depth to make sure I'm not putting too much weight on it. But I moved. I didn't just sit still. I didn't just think about how bad it was. I loved the process of healing. And I think if you fall into that mindset, you'll heal way faster than everyone expects you to, and you'll be happier.
Yeah, I think, look, and we can take a step back on that because you covered a few weeks there very quickly.
I just wanted to give the listeners a bit of a nudge.
It's good. I like it. A few things that you mentioned there as well. Like, you mentioned some of the concerns around calcium and some other of the micronutrients. And I think, again, like what I really want to emphasize here is food first. So you can get you pretty much can get your calcium intake from food. Now, for someone like Nick with a fracture, we're definitely aiming for upwards of around 2,000 milligrams. Now, that's going to be a couple of glasses of milk, some cheese. He had yogurt in his diet, and these were all foods that were recommended. Small oily fish because of the calcium intake in that, and plus the omega-3s. He was recommended that. Now, On top of that, I think in those early phases, I don't see any harm in then recommending, say, 1,000 milligrams of calcium just on top of that in supplemental form. We did also recommend, look, we're just like, if we recommend things, as long as it does no harm from what we know, let's throw it at it because we want to optimize this. So what did we do? Chondroitin sulfate was recommended. We took that at 1,500 milligrams per day. We also recommended the Pillar Motion Armor. It has some eggshell membrane and a few other interesting compounds in it, which, again, look, the research on it, probably limited. Some of the research seems promising. Does it cause any harm? No. Could it potentially accelerate? Maybe. Did it maybe contribute to accelerated healing? We will never probably know, but the outcome so far has been very good. So we did take that. Vitamin D we recommended. You were taking bone broth daily and you were very excited about that. And I said, actually, I don't want you taking bone broth daily. And the reason being is because of heavy metals associated with bone broth. So lead and mercury levels can be higher if in individuals who are consuming bone broth on a daily basis. So we reduced that down. I think we'd said twice a week max.
Yes.
We did that. I think instead of that, we use a whey protein isolate to help assist with total protein intake, which we set. I think at the time, the first week, I think I set you up at around 3 grams per kilo, which was very high amount of protein. And people may argue too high, but to be honest, I was quite comfortable with it, knowing that you probably, you're just getting in that extra protein to assist. And we also included collagen. And again, there is some controversy around collagen and whether it's required if total protein intake through whole food sources and say a good quality whey protein isolate. But we threw it at it because the amino acid composition's a little bit different, higher in proline. Maybe it helps with bone, maybe it helps with tendon. It's certainly not going to do you any harm. Okay, maybe it costs a little bit of money, but again, I think it was 15 or 20 grams a day you were taking with the vitamin C. It adds to it. And again,
creatine also.
Yep. And then the creatine, we just made sure that you were taking 5 grams of creatine per day. Again, taking 5 grams of creatine per day without exercise, is it going to have any benefits around lean muscle mass retention or fat mass reduction? Probably not. Is it just going to probably assist with improving creatine stores in the muscle, maybe long term? Yes. Did we say you would start to exercise the contralateral limb in week 2 and start to do upper body training in week 2? Absolutely. So yeah, that's where creatine and your whey protein, your collagen, total calories, that's where it all starts playing a role. And I think when you heard week 2, I can start doing upper body. Week 2, I can start working the contralateral leg. That's the opposite leg, I should say. You were like, oh, okay, game on. Let's do this.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't really an option for me to not work the injured or the healthy leg so much because everything I did was a one-legged pistol squat to get up and down and on the toilet. Like I was actually so thankful for the last 4 or 5 years, like two or 3 times a week, I will do a full pistol squat on an elevated surface, just down to like almost calf to butt. And it saved a lot of my ability to keep moving. And trust me, there was tons of pain. There was a lot of instability. There was a lot of trying to figure out how to go to the bathroom properly. But one thing I noticed that was really interesting, and this could have been due to a lot of the supplements, but let's be honest, I wasn't going to get up and go to the physical toilet every time I had to use a number 1, right? I was going to have to use a jug or something. And every time I'd be like, this is like apple juice. The color of my urine for probably the first 3 to 4 weeks, it was very dark. And I think it was just because the body was getting rid of a lot. It was cleaning house. It was building, replacing, and growing a lot. I mean, plus a lot of supplements, right?
Yeah, it's definitely supplements can change, the smell and the color of urine. I mean, I'd always say to individuals, try and get it to a fairly non-smelly consistency and color.
I try.
And hydration, obviously, just drinking water obviously plays a big role in that. And probably, again, you're sitting around, you're in air conditioning. Things like that are probably underestimated, the amount of fluids you actually lose just sitting around. So, just being on top of hydration makes a big difference to that as well.
Yeah, it helped a lot. And I think after those x-rays, we had an x-ray usually every few weeks, and after we got x-ray on week, I think it was 8, so around the 1.5, 2 month mark, we were starting to see some of that bone fill in, and then we were starting to do some light crutch, actual walking with a crutch with loading the leg. Then everyone was really worried to give me any green lights to do anything, because they're like, well, if we tell an endurance athlete they can take a toe pressure, they're going to probably just try to take a jump. So I never did anything that hurt me, guys. I just listened to the body. I know my body.
Yep, and I think, look, there is a big part of, if we go back to my physio days, when you saw the early studies around ACLs, for instance, those individual athletes who actually didn't follow the protocols, which was generally recommended, which was a lot of bed rest and that, and what they saw was the athletes that actually got up and started moving and doing things actually had accelerated return to play, which is what really came about these whole accelerated return to play sort of protocols that we now see with ACL surgery, ACL reconstructions and whatnot. And it's probably a little bit the same with a lot of the recovery of elite athletes, which, when you work with an elite athlete, they will push you as a practitioner. Now, coming back full circle to what you said before, like, you have to be strong enough to say no. You can't do that, and you also need to listen to the athlete where they're saying, but I can do this without pain, and I've got no. So then it's about establishing what are those next markers that will allow them to see, okay, if that marker's not right, you can't do that. And so what we started to say with you was, okay, do you have any pain with like a straight leg raise, with your hip movements, things like that? When you were touch weight bearing, did you get any pain? Using the scales, we talked about using just a set of bathroom scales, because you were told, I think, 10% or 15% of your body weight. Now, for most people, they're like, what does 10 or 15% of body weight look like? No one has any idea. So I just said, get a set of bathroom scales, old school ones, stand on a book, good leg on a book, the same height as the other scale, put your bad leg on the scale or the injured leg on the scale, and just shift 15% of your weight over on it. And that's a really nice super cheap biofeedback unit that you've got in your house if you are an injured athlete with a lower limb injury, just to start to, okay, that's what 15% feels like. You can then take that 15% and then start translating that into your walking with your crutches and so on. And you were like, I remember you were like, oh my God, that's a great idea.
It was like a little science experiment. Like, oh, how much is today? Or every day was different, man. And learning how to navigate all of this was kind of fun, man. And honestly, having the Fuelin app to kind of help me get some gauges of the meals that I was taking, and just to make sure I was taking care of the actual numbers, and made it so easy to do. So I couldn't have done it without a lot of resources, but also like, these are resources that are available to everyone.
Yeah, look, I know, and again, what I said to you early on was, look, I don't think you have to track. You've got a pretty good understanding. Now, not everyone will have the same understanding of nutrition and training and everything as you, but what we said was, let's just track for a few days, make sure you're on point with the general levels of, your protein, your fat, your carbs, your total calories in terms of the meals throughout the day. Make sure you're on point. I'll have a look at what you're eating. Okay, everything's great. You're in line. Okay, now just use it as a monitor and sort of a quick reference to say, okay, yeah, I'm hitting that amount per day. And then every few weeks, it was like, hey, let's get back to tracking. Let's have a look. Just make sure you're on point. Okay, now you've started adding in training into training peaks. Okay, now that's coming in. I can see, okay, now you're starting to do 4 hours, 6 hours. What's your training up to now?
I don't want to tell you. It's probably at least 10 or 12 hours this week.
Yeah. So it's high. Like, and you started ratcheting up, and I'm still, wary and putting the handbrakes on you a little bit, just to say, hey, we've got to make sure there is absolutely zero pain here, Nick. If there's any pain, you pull back. Yeah. At this point, touch wood, everything's going well. We brought in, with you were talking about your crutches and you're pretty much carrying them, and you're like, when can I get back to sort of some dynamic activity? It's like, okay, can you go up 2 stairs at a time? Left versus right, in good motion, no pain. You shared the video on social media, and it's one marker. It's one functional performance test. Is it validated? Absolutely not. Is it reliable? Probably not. Is it something in a clinical setting we used to use a lot as one marker for return to running? Yes. Pain-free for you? Okay, well, let's start some little plyometric contacts. That just meant little jumping. It wasn't, right, you're good to run. It was, which I know you were like, am I good to run now? And I'm like, no, you're not bloody good to run. Like, let's just start with some little contacts, 100 contacts, and let's build that up. Double leg, and then you'll gradually go to single leg. Obviously, follow-ups with your surgeon. No pain, no swelling. Well, some of the other things. And again, I know this isn't really nutrition related, but it is always fun to get back into things like you mentioned your single leg squatting. You know, single leg squatting, when it's actually one of the tests we used to use when people had a stress reaction or a stress fracture in their hip. If someone has a suspected stress fracture or stress reaction, get them to do a single leg squat. If that causes pain deep in the hip, it's highly likely that they've probably got a femoral neck stress fracture. So that's a good test to use for you. And again, we started quarter range on the injured leg. Start quarter range, make sure you can do repetitive sets and reps, and then that will build up over time. You'll just start building that in. You'll start building in isometric leg press, all the stuff that you'll do with the strength and conditioning trainer, hopefully with your physio, and they'll just keep monitoring it. But I think, you know, from a perspective of nutrition, it's first couple of weeks, calorie surplus. Make sure you give the injury enough energy to heal. Then we start to pull it down a little bit so you're not gaining too much weight, but then keeping in mind that training volume and training load is going to start to go up. So then the calories and the energy needs are going to go up with regards to that. And so now it's just like, okay, now you're getting back into training. Now you recognize the importance of the nutrition in regards to how you're going to progress as an athlete. And I think that's so often forgotten. It's not hard, it's not complicated, but it's super important.
And for someone like us or elite athletes, I guess, we'll say like it's probably a little easier. You don't have to go to traditional job site. You're not worrying about some of these other stressors that might be causing you to not be able to perform in your life. Like maybe you don't have a supportive, maybe you're a single parent or something. So the stressors can be quite high. And honestly, that's why I want to do more for the community of people who are able and willing to get back to it. And I want to start a level of foundation that can help those who don't get this type of love, support, and supplies that I got. I tell you what, I felt more special than a birthday, than a holiday. Like hundreds of, maybe thousands of messages came in about, hey, I hope you're okay. People were sending me DoorDash in value of like $200. So we didn't have to cook for like 3-4 weeks, man. I mean, the level of generosity I received has made me want to give back so much more to this community of athletes and just goodwill people who want to just everyone to be healthy. We want us all to have that leg up. So for me, this has been one of the most positive things I've had happen to me in the last 10 years, aside from, a great marriage and having kids, all that stuff. And congratulations to you and your wife, Scott, also on your newest.
Thanks, man.
It's gotta be why you needed a coffee right straight when we got to this podcast.
That's why I look. It's also why I look like shit. But anyway, I think it is. There are distinctions, aren't there? Like, some people might go, well, I've got to go to work and I've got to do this, and I guess that's like, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do again with Fuelin is like I guess you're democratizing the ability for people to have access at some level, at least to get the information that typically or historically was only available to people like yourself as a pro athlete. I think as we bring in, what we're doing with athletes like you who are injured is like the proof of concept of can it work in an automated fashion for injuries. And it's not going to be as good as talking to me or talking to Megan or Alan, one-on-one and doing a consultation, which is what I would always recommend. But, can we bring into the new algorithm, the button, I'm injured, what type of injury? Okay, it's a pretty major, minor injury, whichever one you hit. Okay, well, this is what we're going to do with your calories for the next few weeks. This is what we're going to do with supplementation recommendations. This is what we're going to be saying to you to, you know, consider getting screened or baselined. It can be done. You know, it's working through these proof of concepts. They take a little bit longer than what you think, but it's absolutely doable. And if we can open that up to individuals for, you know, $10 a month, they've got a day job, they are a single parent or something, but if it's one less stress they've got in their life, you know, it's a job well done.
Job well done indeed for everything you've done for me too, my friend. And, you know, as we wrap up, and, you know, my injury, we've kind of covered everything that I went through, the supplementing, the practices. Something else we didn't mention that I know a lot of people don't have access to, and I'm sorry, it's not everywhere, but I was getting in the hyperbaric chamber probably once I could get in the hyperbaric chamber and move freely after probably 2 weeks. I was getting there almost to 2 hours a day, and mild hyperbarics, so only like 1.3 atmospheres, not quite the full medical grade. And I believe that helped a ton, and it always has made me feel better in recovery. So if you can get something like that, I think it's beneficial. And then also hot cold therapy, I did some of that after about a month, just to try to give my blood flow a little bit more opportunity to get places maybe it wasn't getting, a little bit of stress hormones to help a little growth. So there's all kinds of little things that add up to a big process, and Fuelin, you all are capturing that. Even something, and we'll wrap after this, but like something you guys are going to be launching too is helping people make meals with just the ingredients they have in their home. I thought that's the biggest, coolest thing you guys, I mean, maybe that's too soon, I don't know, but it's coming.
It's just out. It just got released to everyone on Fuelin. So
that's great.
For every user now, you have the Smart Meals feature, which, you know, if you tap on a meal and you go to the log meal section, next to it is now Smart Meals. You tap on that. I know you sent me a pretty cool video of you just going, you know, selecting the meals with, telling it what you're eating, and it'll give you some pretty cool recipes. So it's I think it's definitely a step in the right direction. It's what athletes were requesting. They wanted instant meal recommendations based around their macros, based on the snack or the main meal, the carb amount, the protein amount, and the fat amount, and quick and easy, you know, coach recommendations, meal widths, or eating out. And I think it's, you know, it's the first iteration of what we're going to get out. I think the next step is, you know, can you just create the entire week's plan? Give me, you know, coach recommendations for meals for the entire week. You hit that button, it does that, you go through them, you go, yeah, I like, change that one. And then it says, give me a grocery list. And that's what's coming after this first iteration, once we get enough feedback and we're happy with it. It's cool, you know. The cool thing about this space we're in with training, nutrition, recovery is that there's just so much that you can do. You know, we talked about it there with, you know, injured. I'm injured. Okay, what can we do? Oh, hit this button and let's do this differently. I'm sick. Okay, what can we recommend with that? And then it's becoming truly personalized. And then with the meals, what can we do? Oh, yeah, we can use AI to generate, you know, 3 meals that fit your preferences in a matter of seconds. And it's just amazing. I mean, it's an amazing time we're living in, I think, in respect to that, and how we can service so many people, you know, for ultimately a fraction of the cost of what it used to cost, and only provided, you know, only access was to those who could afford it. So yeah, I think it's as long as the AI is being used for good and not evil, I'm always a big fan. I'm sure there's some Dr. Evils out there. So.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, Scott, thanks a ton. If you have any questions, if you need to get more information, head over to the fuelin.com website. Scott is available for hire if you so choose to take the highest level of this program, and you can talk with him just like I get to.
Thanks, mate. Look, you know, you're an awesome bloke. I'm not surprised that you were inundated with messages of love and gift cards and all that, because I think it speaks volumes of your character, and everyone I speak to about you always just, you know, they always smile. I think you're that type of guy that just makes people smile, and you know, it's always, the glass is always half full. It's definitely not half empty.
Sometimes it's overflowing, bud. I don't know how to handle that. Well, thanks, Scott. We'll get you back on for a follow-up in a couple other months, and we'll talk about holiday fueling or something like that. But thanks so much for your time and all the support you give Real Triathlon Squad and just the community as a whole.
No, I appreciate it, mate. And it's awesome to see you back on the horse and hopefully just on the trainer still. We did have to take you off the road. Yeah, I know. You're looking at me going, yeah.
Don't check my Instagram, man.
Recovery's going well. Let's just stay on point. Don't get too carried away. And, mate, it's great to see you back.
Yeah, cheers, mate. We'll get you again.
See ya.